Today we're going to talk about helping you avoid all the major mistakes that we see people make when it comes to financial planning. Do you know when you can retire? Do you know how you should invest in retirement? Do you know which accounts you should take money out of first, second, third, and fourth? Can you retire with kids still on the payroll? Do you have a plan in place for medical, Medicare, and long-term care for your retirement? Watch today as we're going to show you how to do this the right way. I'm Brad, Certified Financial Planner, your retirement readiness coach, here with Matt Callahan, Certified Financial Planner and Lead Advisor, and we're going to show you how to avoid all the major mistakes that we see people make all the time. Today we're going to talk about the factors that go into retirement income planning and a lot of the things that people forget to plan for and think through when they're building a financial plan on their own. And Matt, there's so many things that it's hard to even know where to start. So let's start about when can people retire these days?
Yeah, that's a great question and something to definitely consider. There's a number of studies out there that actually say that most people are planning to retire past 65, so 66, 67, out to age 70. And you may think that's crazy because we're hearing more and more that people want to retire sooner than that. But the data, what it's showing is that more people are retiring before 65 than past 65. And it's not because they chose to. They may be running into a position where they lose their job or they get a sickness or an illness that prevents them from working. So it's not always up to them that they're retiring before that age 65.
So in other words, people are thinking they're going to work longer, but they're getting forced to by circumstances to retire sooner.
Right.
So what impact does that have on their financial plan?
A number of different things. I mean, if you didn't plan for the what ifs of one of those scenarios, I mean, now we're looking into medical prior to Medicare. So Medicare turns on at 65. So you'll just have to plan for health insurance. So is it costing you $800 a month? Is it costing you $1,200 a month or somewhere in between? And then just know that one of the things people don't think about is the COBRA. If you lose your job, then you can go on to COBRA, okay, which would provide you with about 18 months of benefit during that time frame. And people typically think that it's more expensive, but it has gotten more reasonable over time.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned Medicare. That's a hot topic with a lot of folks we talk to. How do you incorporate Medicare planning into the financial plans you build?
Yeah, so Medicare, you're going to have to pay for Part B. Well, let me back up. So Part A is going to be free, depending if you worked long enough. And then Part B will be coming out of your Social Security benefits. And then Part C will be an additional out-of-pocket and along with Part D. So the ABCs of Medicare, right? And so we're looking at maybe planning for an additional $400 a month per person for Medicare.
Okay, so you factor $400 per person per year. That's almost $10,000 of Medicare expenses. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I see people failing to add into their financial plan. And $10,000 a year over multiple decades can really add up and be a fairly large expense.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the silent killer we always talk about on medical expenses, that you should incorporate having a higher inflation rate, maybe use 4 or 5% on the medical costs over time.
Right. And then another factor, while we're on the topic of medical, is just long-term care. So if somebody needs help with the activities of daily living, eating, bathing, going to the bathroom, putting clothes on, cooking, that sort of thing, how do you factor long-term care or health expenses into your plans?
Yeah, so you may want to look at long-term care if you're in your 40s, 50s, and even 60s. We've seen people looking at transferring some of the risk to an insurance company, and that's the basics of insurance, is taking some of the risk off of your table and transferring it to the insurance company. But we know that these come with a hefty premium, and one thing that people don't consider, they think it's an all or nothing kind of thing. And you don't have to get the full coverage. And what I mean by that is some of these long-term care events can cost anywhere from $4,000 up to $12,000 a month, depending on where you live. But maybe you can cover $1,000 to $2,000 of that benefit monthly with insurance, which can significantly help your financial plan.
So if it's $4,000 to $12,000 a month, how long on average should people be planning for having that expense in their life?
Oh, yeah, so we plan for 3 years, but you could have 2 to 4 years. It depends on your family history to see what you want to incorporate in your plan.
Okay. Okay. One of the questions that comes up, people ask about, can they retire with kids on the payroll, meaning kids still at home? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm going to defer to you on this one because you have the 4 kids, so I'm curious to know what are your thoughts on this?
You're right. I do have 4 kids, and I tell you what, you go out to eat at McDonald's these days, and it's hard to feed a family at McDonald's. It's expensive. Okay, well, how we approach it is, if you factor in the cost of having higher expenses with kids at home on the payroll, higher food expenses, higher energy bills, higher insurance expense, and then you factor in college, if you've already pre-planned for that using 529s. We really like Vanguard for 529s. So I think if you've pre-planned these expenses and built it into your plan, I think you're okay. What I see happen though is a lot of people haven't really thought it through and they're just kind of winging it. And I think in those situations, trying to retire with kids on the payroll is really hard.
So let's talk through, one of the things we hear a lot about is if you want to retire and you have kids on the payroll, should you fund the 529 plans or should you fund your retirement?
Good question. It reminds me, in a former life, I was a firefighter, and they always trained us that we got to take care of ourselves so we can effect a rescue and help others. Or kind of like when you're flying and you have to put the mask on yourself first before putting it on those around you. So I think that's a way of saying we got to take care of ourselves first. I would suggest funding your own retirement first rather than trying to fund the kids' college or helping the kids out.
Yeah, so another way to look at it is one of the things people aren't thinking about is you can take a loan for school or education. You can't take a loan for your retirement. And so although it's very important to you most likely to pay for your kids' school, just remember that something that you're not thinking about is if what's more important to you, the retirement or paying for school. And then you can always come over the top in retirement and help the kids pay those loans off.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's a good point. Matt, I want to circle back on something. You were talking about Medicare, we're talking about healthcare. When should people start to plan and think through Medicare?
I would start looking at 63. So although you can't sign up for Medicare until later on, 3 months before you're 65, 63 is an important date because if you're doing any tax saving strategies, Roth conversions, or large IRA distributions because of extra vacations that year, that's the first year that they're going to look at what your IRMAA penalties may be when you take on Medicare.
What's IRMAA?
So it's a surcharge on your premiums for Medicare on Part B and Part D if you make too much money. And so there's a nice charts out there that I think the number of married filing jointly, you start over $206,000 of income, there's an additional cost for Part B and Part D.
And it just keeps going up.
Keeps going up, and some of these numbers get very large.
Okay, so it reminds me, you talk a lot about the unintended consequences and the ripple effect, and that's kind of what we're here to coach on. What are some other kind of unintended consequences or ripple effects that come to mind?
We've talked about in the past in other videos, you could be in a 0% long-term capital gains rate. If you go into higher income tax brackets, now you're bumped into 15 or even 20% on your long-term capital gains.
Right, okay, yeah, or the IRMAA surcharges, exactly.
Social Security can be taxed, it can be taxed at 0% up to 50% at certain levels and all the way up to 85%. So that's another thing people don't account for is all these different tax saving strategies that it ends up costing them more because of this ripple effect.
It highlights you really need to know the rules.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
And they change every year.
They do.
Yeah.
They don't make it easy on us, do they? So here's one that's somewhat controversial. We get asked a lot of questions about, should people pay off debt in retirement? Should they pay off the mortgage in retirement? And Dave Ramsey says, pay that mortgage off before heading into retirement. And for years, we would coach on that. But it seems like the game has shifted a little bit. The rules, the environment, the landscape has changed. What are your thoughts on debt in retirement?
Yeah, something to think about definitely, because I mean, it does give you that financial or the feeling of financial freedom, not having any debt or owing anything on the mortgage. But I know a lot of you out there got locked in at these very low interest rate, so good for you. But let's just say that you had a 3% mortgage interest rate. You want to just see, let's look at the tax return. Does it help you on a tax perspective?
Getting a deduction?
Yeah, getting a deduction. Is it helping you get over that standard deduction, which could be helping you significantly over time?
Right.
Or also, I know we're seeing high yield savings accounts now. They're getting 4 to 5%, right? And so if you can get 4 to 5%, and now put your money to work there, then you can get 1 to 2% more on your money by leaving that debt on the table.
Like you always say, make your money work harder for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. What about life insurance policies? Keep or cancel life insurance?
That's a tough one. I find it really hard to cancel life insurance just as a decision at the dinner table. I really should put some thought into it. It's weird to say, but I've never heard anyone say, a beneficiary that's accepted a death benefit, say, oh, I received too much of a tax-free death benefit. Right. So something to consider is that life insurance does provide a tax-free benefit, and this can help you with legacy planning or just leaving a legacy in general. But one thing I would consider that most people don't is, what was the original reason that you purchased the life insurance for? Do those same things hold true to this day? And if not, then maybe consider dropping it. I would run early death scenarios to see, does it make sense to have the insurance in place? But more importantly, like I said, if the cash flow problem paying for the premiums isn't necessarily an issue, it may make sense just to keep it in force.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, it's highly personal. Mm-hmm. It comes down, everybody's situation is different. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. What about Roth conversions? You hear a lot about Roth conversions. We talk about them. What are your thoughts on that?
We love Roth conversions, especially if you find yourself in the 12% tax bracket or lower. As we talked about earlier, most people are retiring before 65, maybe not necessarily because they wanted to. Maybe you lost your job, and very unfortunate, but that could be an opportunity to do a Roth conversion in a lower tax bracket. So that can help you, something to think about in a bad situation.
Okay. All right. Here's one we get asked a lot. When people retire or they change jobs, what should they do with their old 401k, or in some cases 401ks?
So I have to tell you a secret. If you have multiple 401ks, that means you are completely diversified. Not true. That was a joke. It's not a bad joke, but some people will think that they have these multiple 401ks, whether it's with Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, and they think they're diversified because they have these multiple accounts. Just that's something to think about too. You're not necessarily diversified because you have these different accounts. You can, if you could leave them where they're at. So that's one option. I believe the number is something about $5,000. If you have $5,000 or more in the account, they'll let you leave the account where it's at. So pros and cons there, at least you know where they're at kind of thing. But the con is that you're limited to the investment choices on each of those accounts, and you can't make any more contributions. So a second option would be taking all of those three 401ks and rolling them into your new 401k. And keep in mind, this is a non-taxable event, so you can do a rollover into the new 401k. So pros and cons there, as always. Pro is that now you've consolidated all your accounts, your assets don't have overlap and no redundancies, hopefully. But the con there is that you're still limited to the investment options on that 401k. And so what I would prefer is option number 3. You can roll all of those 401ks into one IRA and be completely globally diversified, have that one IRA. You get the full scope of all the investment options. So mutual funds, exchange traded funds, whatever you want to use to build your investment portfolio, typically getting a lower cost, okay, and then having more control there.
Okay, and so you mentioned mutual funds, exchange traded funds. What do you like? What do you recommend? How should people be thinking about that?
I like exchange traded funds more because they typically come with a lower internal expense ratio. Mainly the only difference between an exchange traded fund and a mutual fund is how they get priced on the daily. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Really, we want to be concerned about that internal expense ratio. We call that the hidden cost. You're paying these fees either way. So if you can get an S&P mutual fund or an S&P 500 ETF or exchange traded fund, and this one's cheaper, you may want to consider that.
What about, speaking of cheaper, what about the cost to buy or sell them?
Oh, great question. So some of these mutual funds have a trading cost can be as low as $10. Correct me if I'm wrong, up to 50.
I've seen that. I have seen that
Okay,
before.
so just to buy and sell. So if you're paying for a mutual fund and you buy one at 50 and then sell that same fund, it's another 50. So on both ends, the exchange traded funds no longer have a trading cost with them. So that keeps more money in your pocket as well for retirement.
Well, and so back to the 401k thing, should they roll over or keep it there? In the 401k, do you ever see ETFs, or do you see, what kind of investments do you see in there, and do they give people the tools to really do what they need to do?
I think they're doing better. You're not getting the exposure to exchange-traded funds yet. They may be going there in the future. But one of the bigger things we see that's not happening in the 401ks is you're not getting access to all the different asset classes or areas of the market. So be sure that you have just 7 to 9 different areas of the market, so you can be diversified and you can buy low and sell high kind of thing while rebalancing.
So again, just rolling to the IRA where you get complete control, flexibility, better options. Okay. Switching gears a bit. So when people are factoring in retirement planning, should they have a living trust?
I think the short answer is yes, something to consider. A lot of people think they need a trust in place and then they delay getting it because it's not important to them at that moment. I would argue otherwise and say that's an easy document to get to place. You usually get your other documents in place as well. The will, the directives, everything comes with that trust as a package. And me personally, I would rather have my assets be distributed to who I wanted to. I mean, you worked really hard to grow these things, so let's let you make the decision of where they go rather than letting the courts decide where they're going. So on top of that, I would consider just be aware of who your beneficiaries are and add contingent beneficiaries on those accounts if you have people that you can name. And then worst case scenario, if you don't feel like the kids are mature enough to be beneficiary or contingents on the accounts, name the trust on there.
Okay. Okay. So you hear a lot about, as people are getting closer to retirement or in retirement, that they should get more conservative with their investments, more conservative with their asset allocation. Talk to us, should a retiree be in all cash or all bonds, or what's the ideal asset?
Don't do all cash. This is one of the biggest landmines that you could do. We can talk about different times of the market. If you just miss some of the best days, you're losing a lot of your wealth over time. And I know we just said earlier that you can get 4 or 5% on cash or cash equivalents, and that seems pretty good. But remember, if that's the risk-free rate, then you should be compensated for the equity premium. So we all know that risk and return is related. So if cash is paying a good amount, then we suspect that your investment portfolio should do well over time.
Okay.
But to answer your question, I mean, not getting too conservative too soon can also be a hindrance on your overall plan, because we want to make sure that you're keeping up with inflation and keeping your purchasing power strong.
Okay.
I mean, the dollar, it'll still be $1, but what is it going to purchase? I mean, I just bought gas the other day, and it's not buying the same gallons that it used to.
No, I bought some French fries at McDonald's. It's $4.50 for a medium fry. My goodness. But so on that note, so talk to me about inflation. Can cash keep up with inflation, or how should people factor in inflation in their retirement planning?
Yeah, that's a huge one. You need to absolutely consider this, because cash over the long term is not going to keep up with inflation. We see it over and over that just the amount of goods and services you can buy isn't there if you don't account for this.
Okay.
And so, inflation, I would say pick a number. You don't want to be too conservative. Our boy JP, he said he's trying to keep the inflation rate at about 2% over the long term.
Oh, Fed Chair pal.
Yeah,
JP, got it.
Yeah. So
first name basis.
Right.
I love it.
So he's telling me specifically that they're targeting a 2% rate over the long term. You may want to be a little more than that. That's something to consider, just to make sure.
Do you think he can do it? Do you think he's going to get us, kind of navigate that soft landing and get us to 2? Or?
I think so. I think this we've seen a lot of it already be priced into the market, and so I believe we're getting there. Our pockets aren't feeling good right now because inflation does feel high.
Yeah.
And it did get high. It's starting to cool off a bit, but that doesn't mean that the cost of things went down too.
Right.
So
JP. So when it comes to retirement planning and people taking money out of their investment accounts, what accounts should they take money out of first, second, and third?
Ooh, that's a good one. So General financial planning will tell you, and there's some other things that you can consider within your plan, but general financial planning will tell you, let's start with the cash account, and then let's move on to the taxable investment account or your brokerage or trust account. And this has the more favorable long-term or capital gains rate. Sorry, it could be 0, 15, or 20%. Be careful when you're selling in this account because you could run into selling at short-term gains, which is just a fancy way of saying your ordinary income rates. And then after that, this may be controversial, but IRA and then Roth IRA. And you're probably thinking, well, why the Roth IRA last and traditional IRA before that? I thought the IRA is fully taxable at ordinary income. It's true, but what we're thinking, depending on your overall goals, is that maybe you're in a lower tax bracket now, so you can start taking these distributions here to do a couple of things, lower your required distributions in the end, and then also, and when your kids or whoever your beneficiaries are inherit these accounts, they'll be fully taxable at their income rate. So maybe it makes sense to grow your Roth dollars as long as possible in a tax-free manner to pass on to the generation tax-free dollars.
Right. And one thing, a question for you, now thanks to the Secure Act, IRAs are subjected to the 10-year rule. Does that change your thinking at all about taking money from the taxable account before the IRA, or is there, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I love that question. This is pretty new because of the Secure Act 2.0. Remember we just said cash, taxable, IRA, Roth IRA. Well, we may want to do IRA before the taxable account because with current law, we've got that step up in cost basis. So it could be another tax strategy to pass on more tax-free wealth.
What does that mean for those of the audience that don't know? What is this step up in basis?
So to make it easy, let's just say that you bought the S&P 500 for $100. And then you sold it for $200. Typically, if you sell while you're live, then you'd owe capital gains tax, short or long term, depending on holding period, on $100, right?
Okay.
So terrible subject, but if you had that S&P 500 and then it grew to $200 and you passed away, then you get the basis. Your basis of $100 gets stepped up to that $200. So virtually, your beneficiary can sell that S&P for no taxes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So literally they can inherit the money and then they can sell it and pay nothing in taxes. Mm-hmm. So then is there a way to manage, it doesn't have to be an all or a nothing thing. Can they take some of the money from their taxable account and some from their traditional IRA and kind of manage the tax bracket, so to speak?
Absolutely. I think this is something that people aren't thinking about. This is a huge one, is that that's why you have all these different spigots of how you save for retirement. It can make a lot of sense to do some from some and some from the other to help give you longevity on your retirement assets. There's studies that show that as well.
Keep that tax bill lower. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. What do they say? You want to pay your fair share, but you never want to leave a tip.
Don't tip the IRS.
Yeah. Well, clearly there's a lot of factors that go into effective retirement planning. And, the folks that we meet, sometimes they're thinking about some of these things, but not others. Sometimes these can turn into big landmines that people step on unintentionally. So whether you're out there doing this on your own or you would like some guidance, feel free to get in touch with us. We're happy to help. We're happy to lend an ear and just give you some of our expertise if you need help. So as you can see, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and there's a lot of complexity, and there's a lot of margin for error. To make a mistake here is critical and costly, and we want to help you avoid the major mistakes that we see people make. So if you have questions, if you want to delegate this to professionals, or you just simply want a thought partner on your journey, there's a link in the description below. Make sure to schedule a call, and Matt or I would be happy to help you and give you our feedback.
And if you like this content, be sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend or a family member. We want to get our content out to them as well.